그리드라는 혁명적인 변화가 진행 중인 세계 전력 산업. 모든 나라들이 더 많은 전력을 생산하면서 탄소 배출을 줄여야 하는 에너지 딜레마에 빠져 있다. 이 문제를 푸는 방법으로 전력을 덜 소비하고 에너지를 효율적으로 사용하는 스마트 그리드가 해법으로 제시되고 있다. 현재 신재생에너지 개발에 모든 국가가 뛰어들고 있다. 태양광 에너지가 대세로 자리 잡고 있으며 관련 기술은 예상보다 빠르게 개발되고 있다. 전 세계적으로 전기를 필요로 하는 사람들에게 안전하고 깨끗한 전기를 공급하는 슈나이더 일렉트릭. 에너지 생산성 향상과 더불어 누구나 쉽게 이용할 수 있고 기후변화 문제에 대처하는 최적의 에너지 관리 솔루션 제공이라는 사명하에 세계 곳곳에서 빈곤층 에너지 제공 사업 및 에너지 관련 직업 교육을 통한 취업 지원 사업을 펼치고 있다. 기술력과 잠재성이 큰 한국에 대한 투자를 늘리고 새로운 기업 인수도 추진할 계획이라는 에릭 론돌라 아태지역 전력사업부문 총괄 부사장을 만나본다.
안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
Oh, you speak great Korean.
Just a few words.
Welcome to Korea and thank you for having an interview with us. And also the first question, before we dive into specific questions, could you introduce about Schneider Electric?
Yep, sure. I mean, Schneider Electric is a company which has 170 years of age. We operate in more than 130 countries, employing more than 110,000 people. Our revenue in 2010 amounted to 20 billion euro. And as a company, we are dedicated to energy management. We are the global specialist in energy management. We operate in different fields, different end-user markets, residential, building, industry and machine builders, utilities and infrastructure, as well as data centers and network. So as you can see, these markets have very different cycles, which is a big advantage of the way we are set up.
And I know that Schneider Electric has done many M&As, and among them, which do you think is the most successful M&A case that Schneider Electric has done?
What has to be understood is that our growth pattern in the past is based on 50% organic growth and 50% inorganic through acquisitions. But our acquisition strategy relies on a very strong organic growth. So we complete our organic growth with acquisitions. So we've done in the past big acquisitions, which names are very known, like the APC in the data center and network industry, like Areva in the utilities and infrastructure markets. But we have also done local acquisitions here in Korea, and Samwa EOCR, namely, which for us is a very successful acquisition because we've been able to leverage the potential of that relatively small Korean company worldwide using the Schneider network.
Okay. And now I want to talk about the case that happened in Korea. In September 2011, there was a nationwide power outage which caused enormous damage in Korean economy. And then people started to realize about the energy crisis. And what's your view on the worldwide concern, which is the energy crisis?
So first of all, what happened in Korea could have potentially happened in many different places and could in the future happen in many different places. What is quite amazing, because I've got some of the statistics and numbers, is the incidence, the consequence of the power outage. I mean, in Korea, we talk about 62 billion Korean won. So we understand the magnitude of the impact of an outage. Now, why am I saying that it can happen anywhere? When you look at the statistics and the demographics of the world, we believe that until 2050, the energy demand will probably double. If you look at the electricity demand, it will probably double, but until 2030, so 20 years earlier. Why? Because the world is growing. We're going to have 2 billion people more on our planet in 2050, because there's a fantastic wave of urbanization. People moving from the rural areas to the cities. And we're talking about 500 million people in the coming 15 years moving from the rural areas to the cities. So this fantastic energy demand is there. At the same time, you know, we have to make our world the most sustainable one. Everybody has heard about power outage. We've heard about the climate changes. So we need to reduce our CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
And you know, as many countries, it's the case also of Korea, we are part of the agreements in order to reduce CO2 emissions, and we need to reduce CO2 emissions in the same time frame by a factor 2. So energy demand doubles, while at the same time we need to reduce CO2 emissions by 2. So this is an impossible equation. We call it the energy dilemma, because the more you consume energy, the more you also create CO2 emissions. So we need to radically change the way we consume energy and we produce energy.
It seems like a huge dilemma that people are facing. So in order to prevent the energy crisis, what do you think is the counter-proposal in supply aspect?
Like I was saying, there are two aspects. So let's start with the supply side.
Okay.
So the name of the game here is to generate energy in a more cleaner way. So there are many different ways to do it. So we can look at the existing fossil plants or thermal plants. So if you take the example of Korea, 77% of the energy production today is coming from fossil or thermal plants, which is not a clean way to produce energy.
Yeah.
So we can improve those. So that's one first way to do it. The other way is to go to cleaner source of energy. So namely nuclear. And today when you look at the energy plan of Korea, nuclear is weighing 20%, probably moving up to 50% of the energy production in Korea until 2024. And probably the third aspect is renewable, that we talk a lot at this point in time. So it's wind power, but it's also solar. That has also to increase. And I think if we look at the Korean equation, today probably it's 2% of the energy production, moving to 9% in 2024. So at the level of the energy production, we need to put in place cleaner way of producing energy.
Besides the supply aspect, how about the other part of the counter-proposal, which is the consumption aspect?
Yeah. So at consumption level, what we absolutely need to do, we need to reduce the energy consumption. So we need to do energy saving, we need to conserve energy. And it's feasible. You know, at this point in time, we believe that by implementing the right behaviors and the right solution in many different type of application, we can go to save up to 30% of the energy consumption. So I can give you a lot of examples, but you know, as a company, we have, for instance, a head office in Paris. So when we moved to that new office, we had people scattered all over Paris, and we were consuming 400 kilowatt hour per square meter per year. When we moved in those new premises, which is an energy efficient building, using all our solutions, the consumption went down to 80 kilowatt hour per square meter per year. So we reduced the consumption by a factor 5. So this is feasible. It happens. We also helped by a lot of governments today that are putting regulations, threshold, you know, on existing buildings and new buildings, for instance, on what should be their consumption. So for instance, we have the 100 kilowatt hour per square meter per year, which is in many countries set at the threshold that, you know, the entrepreneurs, that the investors have to reach. So energy consumption is the way to go. There is a huge potential, and it's also helped by the laws, because we believe that in the future, probably those achievements will be law enforced, helping people to further reduce their energy consumption.
So if it's possible to reduce the energy usage by 30%, I think it would have a great ripple effect on the economy. So are there any such cases?
Sure. What I would say first, you know, we've talked about generation and we've talked about consumption. What is extremely important to understand, you know, we here today in Seoul, so we're talking together, we have microphones, we have cameras, so we use energy basically. For 1 unit of energy that we are today consuming here together, there is somewhere in Korea a generation plant which is consuming an equivalent of 3 units, which means that for us to consume 1 unit here, we need to produce 3 units somewhere in a generation plant. So this process is very inefficient. There's a lot of loss between the generation plant and the consumer.
Yes.
This has a consequence. If we save 1 unit of energy at consumption level, we're going to be saving 3 units at generation levels, which means that we will have to generate less energy. So today we concentrate a lot on energy conservation because that is the fastest way to help solve the dilemma and the equation I was mentioning before.
So far, we talked about counterproposal in supply aspect and also the consumption aspect. And as a result, what is the most cost-efficient and fastest way to solve this problem?
Let's take a very simple example. So we're here today and we're talking, but we need energy for this broadcast to be made. So microphones, cameras, lights, whatever. So for 1 unit of energy that we are today consuming here to make this happen, there is somewhere in Korea a generation plant which is producing the equivalent of 3 units. So for 1 unit consumed, we need to produce 3 units because we have a very inefficient process from generation to delivery to the consumers. This has a very interesting consequence. If we together, for instance, save 1 unit of energy at consumption level, we're going to be saving 3 units at generation level, which means that we would have less generation means to implement. For us, the absolute priority is energy conservation for that matter.
And if it's possible to reduce the energy usage by 30%, I think it would have a great ripple effect economically. And are there any such cases?
Oh, of course. You know, energy conservation or energy efficiency is a fantastic business model at this point in time because people that experience it have got 2 main upsides. The first one is that they reduce their energy bill because energy costs. And when you reduce your energy consumption, you reduce your cost. Second, by reducing your energy consumption, you help the world become a more sustainable place to live. So let's take examples. You know, we have many references around the world, but we can take a reference that we did put in place in 1997 here in Korea, in Seoul. So it's the Coex Convention and Exhibition Center, you know, which is basically a big complex where you have hotels, a trade center, you have restaurants, you have malls, so a kind of a small city in itself. And what we did, we implemented a fully automated system from cooling, air conditioning, all the power monitoring, all the power flows, all the access control. And all this is working seamlessly connected to a building automation software. What are the results? The results is that this complex has been able to do 5% energy saving on a yearly basis since we implemented the system. At the same time, they have reduced their operating cost by 25%. And as I was saying before, energy costs. And probably that in the future, energy will further rise. So it's very good saving at this point in time, and it will generate even more saving when the energy costs will rise in the future. So this is a vivid example which is showing that energy conservation can be done, not only be done, but also generate big financial impacts.
And compared to other OECD countries, Korea has only a half of the amount of the average electricity bill. So energy was never considered as money in Korea. But in other countries, what are the amounts of electricity bill?
Well, that's a very interesting case because energy is subsidized. You know, when you produce energy, it has a cost. But then, seen by the consumers, the cost may be different because it is subsidized by governments. And it's true that if you take on a 100 basis, what would be the electricity bill index in Korea, when you look at countries like UK or country like France, we're talking about 148, which is 1.5 times more expensive. If you talk about Japan, and not integrating the latest measures in Japan of increase of the cost of electricity, we're talking about 170, which means that in Japan, it's nearly twice the cost that we have in Korea. So it's true that when you have cheap electricity, it may not be seen as a very strong incentive to reduce the consumption. But what we have to understand is that this is one subsidized, and in the future anyway, tendentially, the price of energy will rise. So the people in Korea, I think, are more and more understanding that the battle of energy, even if the cost of energy appears low, is a battle that is worth fighting.
Then besides Korea, how is the energy situation in other developing countries?
I'm not sure I would classify Korea in a developing country, but we can talk about what happens in developing countries anyway. In developing countries, there is a strong need to save energy because the energy demand is growing faster than in some other places. So if we come back to what we've been describing before, for these countries, it is essential to save energy, because by saving energy, they allow the country to grow much faster, which is not a very easy thing to understand, but this is the reality of the case. In many countries and developing countries, you have a lot of outages at this point in time. So there is a strong need in these countries to implement all the energy conservation measures and all the sophisticated system that we are putting in place between consumption and generation of energy to make it happen. But let's not believe that emerging countries don't have needs. They have needs, and they are probably going to be at the forefront of the technologies system that we are going to use to save energy.
And speaking of developing countries, I know that Schneider Electric is very much interested in CSR. And what does Schneider do for people living in developing countries who cannot use electricity?
So as I've said before, we are the global specialist in energy management, and we believe that one of our mission is to help the countries and to help the people in some countries that do not have access to electricity, do not have access to energy. So we have a socially responsible fund of 3 million euro that is purposely created to help these countries. So what do? First, we train people. And we train a lot of people on energy matters, on electricity matters. We also help entrepreneurs that want to develop business in the field of energy, in the field of electricity. And at the same time, we also develop very innovative offers that are dedicated to these people. 1.6 billion people today on Earth that do not have access to electricity. So namely, we've been developing, for instance, lighting systems with LEDs, so very high luminescence, very low consumption, which are powered by a small solar panels. And we go in villages, in India, for instance, where we would install these panels to bring light to people that do not have access to light, that do not have access to electricity.
I want to hear more about BIBOP program, which is a CSR project in Korea. And can you introduce to us?
Yeah, we've been extremely successful in Korea. So for instance, we've been developing an e-learning program of more than 100 lessons on energy matters. And would you believe it? We have more than 8,000 people that have been registering and that are currently following the courses. What we've also done in Korea, I was talking before about this system of LED lighting with solar panels. So we've implemented that in Korea around the Iksan region for underprivileged elderly people.
And from now on, I want to ask you a few personal questions, if you don't mind. And what position are you in charge of in Schneider Electric?
Well, at this point in time, I'm managing our operations in Asia Pacific. which is covering the countries from Japan down to the Pacific Islands, well, including India and China.
So besides the BIPOP program, how about the LULI project?
LULI program is also a program that we're developing in all the countries, and we're doing that also in Korea. So for instance, in 2011, we've been helping 18 students to get access to a certification in the matters of electricity.
Okay. As we talked earlier in this interview, Schneider Electric has done many M&As. But after doing so much M&As, isn't it hard to unify all of them to one organization?
The purpose of Schneider Electric is to be active on 5 businesses. And on those 5 businesses, we are leading or co-leading. But our unique positioning in the competitive landscape is also to be capable to unite those 5 businesses together in front of our customers and offer an integrated solution which is taking into account those 5 businesses. At this point in time, nobody can do this. So at the same time, when we have to integrate acquisitions, I mean, we've done it in the past many, many times, and we've been developing a know-how, understanding that every acquisition is specific. And I think that Schneider Electric is taking into account the fact that when we integrate a new company into ours, we have to understand its specificities, take them into account to have a smooth integration. So yes, it's never the same, it's not easy, but we've done that many, many times, and I think we've developed a strong know-how.
Okay. And also Schneider Electric was ranked 26th among top 100 sustainability global group and by Davis Forum. And what do you think is the reason?
Maybe 2 major reasons. The first one, as you've understood, we are very dedicated to energy management, energy conservation. So we are developing solutions that help make the world a more sustainable one because our solution bring energy savings. The second thing is that we are extremely involved in a barometer index that measures how good our company is doing on different aspects that lead to sustainability. And that barometer, that index, is measured every quarter, communicated every quarter, and it's extremely important for the company, but also for the people, for the employees, for every individual who's working for Schneider Electric. And the people working for our company are very proud to be in a company which is so clear and so dedicated to sustainability.
And I heard that you've been working in a lot of other foreign countries, and among them you're now currently working in Korea. And how is your impression of Korea?
I've got a great impression about Korea. What you have to know is that when I started my career a long time ago, I used to work in Asia and I used to come to Korea quite often. I think that Korea is a very interesting country and in Asia Pacific, you know, the zone that we're looking at this point in time. It's a technological country which is probably developing some of the key leading technologies for the future in many different sectors. Korea has been extremely active in energy matters. You know, when we talk about the Jeju Island, you know, the smart grid test bed. So this is something that we have been as a company following, and you know, we are quite impressed by what Korea has done in terms of being forward-looking, putting in place all different types of technologies to try also and solve this energy equation, because the smart grid and the test bed in Jeju is basically creating a link between the consumption and the generation that we've been talking about before. So very positively impressed about Korea in general, and what we have to understand that we have here in Korea a strong footprint, a strong historical footprint. We have factories, we have logistic centers, we have a lot of different people working for us, and we hope to grow further in the future.
So do you have any advices that you can give to Korean entrepreneurs?
I would not dare to give advices. I think that Korean entrepreneurs are very well aware. I think that one of the key mottos is that there is no economy without energy. So, and I think that Korean entrepreneurs are very conscious about the fact that energy is a scarce resource, and that we have in the future to look very carefully at the way we're using that energy to make it more efficient for us and contributing to the sustainability of our planet.
Okay, this is the last question. Schneider Electric has over 170 years of history, and at first it started with steel and heavy industry, and now it became a global energy management company. And I'm curious about its future and its vision. And what do you think of it?
Well, I think we are a very young and dynamic company when it comes to energy management, which is, what we've decided to focus on in the 21st century. So I think that our company is dedicated to this, and there's a very interesting future on that business. And more, we're going to be capturing information at our customers on all the different markets that I've been mentioning. We're going to be capturing that information, storing it, analyzing it, to give a further advice to our customers, to give them a further service. So I think that that's also the way that Schneider is going to be completing its vision as the global specialist in energy management, capturing information and giving back service and a lot of different ideas and solutions on how to improve further the energy management of all our customers.
Okay, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope you enjoy your visit in Korea.
I will surely enjoy my visit. Thank you so much. 감사합니다.
감사합니다.